Good morning, everyone. It's so great to have you here on this nice spring day. Finally, we've got some sun and some warm weather. I don't know about you, but I'm thankful for it. And I want to welcome those of you that are watching online, and I'm not sure which camera you're on, but welcome to you as well. The program will be available on YouTube in about a week, along with our other archive programs. And we can tell you more about that at the end. I know some of you have to leave early. Anyway, I would like to introduce Scott Applewick, who is our host today. Oh, excuse me. That's what I get for not bringing notes up. I want to introduce Margaret Fox for a quick prayer and introduction. Thank you.
So I guess I'll introduce God, and then Scott will introduce our guest. Thank you, Sue, for convening us, and thank you all for being here today. I love Third Age. It's one of my favorite days of the month is when we gather, and I'm really grateful for the variety of topics that we get to hear about. I'm really excited to hear Brenna's presentation today. But before we begin, let's say a word of prayer. Let's pray. Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations. We thank you, God, for the homes that you have provided us, the structures where we live, the people who surround us, the spiritual home that we have in church. We ask, God, that you would help us in the ministry of discernment. Help us to be wise, help us to be faithful, help us to be relational, help us to listen to you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, Scott.
Well, in case you hadn't heard, my name is Scott Applewick. I'm on the Third Age Committee here at Westminster Presbyterian Church, and our speaker today is Brenna M.Galvin, who is the co-managing shareholder and elder law attorney at Macer, Amundson, and Boggio. I'd be remiss not to mention that we've had speakers in the past from Macer, Amundson, and Boggio, and they've always been so gracious and generous with their time and expertise, so thank you very much. Brenna is also an end-of-life doula, and her practice focuses on estate planning, life care planning, asset protection, veterans benefits, medical assistance, special needs planning for individuals with disabilities, including supplemental and special needs trusts. She is actively involved in local and national organizations, including the board of the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys, board member of Kairos Alive, member of the Elder Law Governing Council of the Minnesota State Bar Association, and past president of the Minnesota chapter of the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys. One busy woman. So please join me in welcoming Brenna M.Galvin.
Thank you all so much for coming today. As Scott mentioned, I'm Brenna. He did a great job presenting, so you don't need to read about my practice areas here. But I just want to talk to you for a second about why I'm passionate about the work I do and how this fits with this conversation. I was, I guess, an odd child, and was really grew up in a family that was very multi-generational, and kind of sitting at tables with 2-year-olds and 85-year-olds was my norm. And I carried that love and skill set with me throughout my life. And when I was looking after going to the University of Minnesota to study psychology, I was really drawn to how the practice of law is a helping profession and could help counsel individuals through different life transitions, especially when it relates to disability and aging. And I kept seeing these issues arise for individuals with disabilities or individuals as they encountered either chronic care needs or short-term care needs, where it seemed like we needed more advocacy and more kind of relational support through that. And the way that I've chosen to practice has been based on that desire and that passion to kind of walk in partnership with my clients as they're going through these transitions. Our firm is really unique with this life care planning, as Scott mentioned, that practice, and I'll talk to you a little bit about that more, but one of my partners who's come to speak previously, Chris Mazer, she's a pretty memorable lady if you've encountered her. Chris was seeing in her clients this real, these situations arise where her clients, some of them had spouses that were incapacitated and needing care, and she developed really in the late 80s, early 90s, this cohort, she called it, of women that she was helping navigate placement for their spouses and helping them really create a support group about how do they deal with the consequences that come from caregiving for a loved one with a disability, and then how do they ensure that they have the quality of life that they want and need. And through those needs, she took on and hired a licensed social worker on our team. And ever since then, we, as a law practice, have embodied or had a social worker on our staff. And today, our wonderful care coordinator, Cindy Johnson, is here. Will you raise your hand, Cindy? A lot of what Cindy does within our office is helping our clients navigate these transitions, especially when a care need is present. How do we make determinations about whether we age in place or whether we make a transition to move? And so we laughed when we were asked to do this presentation. I was like, I'll start talking because attorneys tend to take the mic most frequently. But if she gives me the nod or we have time for questions, I want to be sure that you have the benefit of both of our knowledge here today. When I thought about what issues come up, I think that our goals today should be to identify the available housing options that exist and the key distinctions between them, because the senior housing landscape can be overwhelming to navigate. And it's marketed strongly, and what I mean by that is you can see lots of places that purport to offer many things, and it's hard to differentiate what is the distinction between, let's say, independent senior apartments or condominiums, townhome communities, versus maybe a continuing care retirement community or an assisted living with memory care options. What are the distinctions between those options that are available? And what are the special considerations that you should all have when you're selecting care particularly? It's very difficult to find. I've had clients come to me after searching and spending nights staying up when their loved one has a care need to figure out how they're going to locate quality care and what to do when that care, what's promised from that care isn't working out in practice. And so I want you to know some of the questions and the things that we think about when we're working with people to help arm you for these choices. And I think it's important because it's a natural segue to talk a little bit about the costs tied to these different options, what the averages are right now for care costs, and the different sources of payment for those costs of care. So when I think about aging in place, there's the idea of aging in place and the reality. These don't always align, right? How many of you, just show of hands, are living in single-family homes at this time? Okay, the majority, vast majority. And how many of you would tell me it's your desire to leave their feet first? Okay. So I'm really proud of you for coming then and exploring what could be beyond, this option. But I want to say that that's really common. I don't think anyone spends their life planning for this third age or this third wave in their life, and to think about, nobody is very chipper when they come to me saying they want to look for a place that may offer care services down the road, right? That's not something that any of us desire. Most people, when you talk to them about really planning, either care planning or planning for death and dying particularly, they are hoping, we all hope, that we're going to die peacefully in our sleep with no care necessary beforehand, right? That's all of our goal. And I think that that's a great thing for us to aspire to. The reality is 80% of us are going to have some sort of either chronic or short-term disability in our lives. So we're going to have to know that this is something that we may encounter either for a short term or long term, and we need to be prepared for that. So there's some things that you should consider when we're talking about aging in place in your homes, as you know them to be now. One is family. And this is really starts a conversation. I think that when people have done surveys with individuals, most people say that they want to talk to their loved ones about planning and care, but they don't know how to start that conversation, or they haven't had that conversation. And children say the same thing. And often when we sit down with those kids, and they're the ones coming to us for planning because there's been an emergency with care, they feel very overwhelmed that maybe their parents' expectations didn't align with their expectations. Now, the MIT, the Massachusetts Institute for Technology, started an age lab in 1999. It's a fascinating organization, and I would encourage you to check out their website about the research that they're doing right now and innovations in aging. And when they did a survey from caregivers, a study on caregivers, they found that children who were working and acting as caregivers, or spouses who are still working and acting as caregivers, on average spent 30 hours a week caregiving. And we're seeing this really present a problem in numbers, right? Things have changed generationally. People are having fewer kids. Divorce is more common. And so there's an issue where there's not enough man and woman power, right, to provide the labor that we used to do as a family in our homes. So when I talk about families, I want to encourage you, if you're looking or thinking about how your family members could support you to age in place, to have conversations, and to think beyond what your traditional family structures, to think about your chosen families, your faith communities, and really explore what those groups are willing and able to do to help in that process. And we need to think about mobility. How are you going to get from place to place if driving becomes a concern? Okay. How are we going to do transportation? Now, we're lucky in that technology is helping us in some of the accessibility of rideshare platforms, but we have to have a comfort level with that technology. There's safety considerations with using it. And we need to think about really structurally how your home is designed. This is something that often clients say to me, why would I move now? My like, stairs aren't a problem for me, and isn't it good for me to work out and do stairs every day as part of my daily life, right? And you're not wrong. But I'll speak from a recent experience. I recently moved from a single-family home in South Minneapolis. Little 1.5 story, you can envision it, right? It's got steps from the sidewalk up to the house, steps down from the house to the driveway, steps up to the bedrooms, upstairs, downstairs, laundry. We have to think about when my mom came to visit, and my dad, who had a disability, my dad was like, there's not enough railings, I can't get in and out of your house easily, we have to install more. We had to think about what are the trip hazards with area rugs on these hardwood floors, right? What are the things that he could get caught up on? And how he would function in the home. And when I moved from that house recently, my mom in her early 70s, very fit, walks 90 minutes a day, said to me, Brenna, this house is for someone who's under age 40. And I said, really? And she said, yes, this is just so many steps to go in and out, to and from the car, to upstairs where I was staying. You know, you have a different perspective on things at different stages in your life. Now, if your house is set up, sometimes people tell Cindy and I, yeah, my house is accessible. There's a bathroom on the first floor. Is there a bedroom on the first floor? Yes, but I don't sleep there. Would you consider sleeping there? No. That's not my bedroom, that's where the guests stay. Okay, where's your laundry? Downstairs. Do you do your own laundry, or is somebody helping you with your laundry? These are the questions about how we work and function in a home. And I think that often people initially come to us saying that their home is accessible, and when we start thinking about how it's arranged, it may not be as accessible as they had thought. Or if there's steps in, do we have supportive railings? Are you going to be able to do steps if you have a walker or another device, a wheelchair? The other big issue that people have when they're talking to me about a potential move is related to how they see themselves and how they see people in senior housing. Okay, so I have clients who tell me, I could never see myself in one of those communities. It's filled with old people, right? I don't want to go there. That's where people go to die. That's not how I want to live, right? This is, I hear a little laughter, but that's honest, we don't, I think that I guess if there's something that's let us down in the marketing of these options, right, is how do we see ourselves and how we want to live and how we like to live, and can we see a community that offers enrichment opportunities where that can really develop and blossom. And then I want to go through how the MIT Age Lab talks about this. They offer 3 questions, or pose 3 questions. And they want you to think about first, and I want you, if you will, indulge me in this process, take a few minutes to think about this and write this down. As you age, who's going to change your light bulb? Right now, if your light bulb burns out, do you grab a ladder or a step ladder and climb up to fix it? If you can't do that, do you know who you would call to do that for you? Really, this is a question of, do you have a plan for how you're going to maintain your home? Right? Who will change your light bulb is a cute way to ask, how are we going to maintain our homes? And really, what are the cost considerations to that? Because often clients tell me the cost to move is so expensive. There are hard costs associated with that, right? There's the labor involved in moving, there's the time, there's the actual expense of cleaning out, organizing, hiring movers, finding a place. And then there's potentially rental rates or a buy-in where I would go as well. There's big costs to that. What's harder to identify, and it's been harder to put into tangible numbers for people, is the cost to maintain a property, right? If you can't do it, is your plan that you would call, if you couldn't change your light bulb, would you call a child to do that? Would you call a handyman to do that? What is the plan? How would you get an ice cream cone? Now, this is perfect timing in Minnesota because weather's warming up. We're seeing people biking outside, right? We're starting to thaw out from our hearts to our exteriors, right? So how would you get an ice cream cone? Imagine yourself on a beautiful day. It's gorgeous outside. You've sat on the patio drinking a cup of coffee in the morning. You've maybe read outside. You've met up with friends for lunch. And now you'd like to go get an ice cream cone on this gorgeous day. How are you going to get there? Do you have adequate transportation to go where you want to go, but also when you want to go? Because sometimes those ice cream cravings don't come. You want to be able to go when it comes, right? Not at a perfect time when it's scheduled with a driver. Okay? So really, how will I get an ice cream cone is a question that I want you to think about in relation to aging in place. And do you have adequate transportation? None of us like to think about a time where your license is taken away. I can tell you the vast majority of my clients never have their licenses revoked. What generally happens is that slowly they start narrowing where they're driving, right, to an area that they feel more comfortable with. Yesterday I met with a client whose husband has dementia and is in his early 70s, and he's self-regulated to drive about a half mile to the store that has bird feed. Next door there's a McDonald's, right, and a gas station. Really the only place he'll drive is there and back. And this is already starting to be a safety concern, right? There's already times where he's getting disoriented. And so how are we going to make a plan for his transport? Is the plan caregiver doing that? Is it to hire a third party? And the third question MIT asks people to consider is, who will I have lunch with? Often for individuals who are in a couple or a partnership, they might think about, well, usually I have lunch with my spouse, or we each eat respectively, we come together. My social network starts there. And then I have a group of friends or a faith community, book groups, who talk through these things. As you age, who will you have lunch with? And are they available to you? Do you have a dependable social network? And this is someone that you could rely on, right? Not just a kind of a remote friendship circle, which are important to our well-being as well, but who would you really want and be able to see for our meals? And the reason that MIT is studying this is because, as we've talked about already, there's a real shortage right now. And we'll talk about it more as we explore care as well and the care component to this. But the research shows us that based on the numbers of people aging, we do not physically have enough bodies to care for the people who want to stay in their homes. And we're not going to have, from that labor shortage, we're going to have to think about What's a more effective delivery mechanism for care? And these are crude ways. This is like how the businesses think about this, right? Not how we talk about it generally. But these are questions, the way MIT is phrasing this is like, how is this impacting you, right? How are these dynamics, these market dynamics, these cultural and societal dynamics impacting you personally when you're making these decisions? One of the things that I talk to people about who joke with me about wanting to leave their house feet first is this social network. What do your days look like, right? If transportation's not available to you, or if you don't have regular social network access to that in the way you've known it to be, that can be a very isolating experience too. And so we need to plan for that and make sure that you're enriched in those ways. It's not that it can't happen, it's that we need to be intentional to ensure it does happen well. Okay. So I'm not trying to sell you on moving. I just want you to know the idea of age in place is a perfect thing to do if it's right for you, but there's the reality of it that we need to consider and plan for. So on the flip side, if we move, what does that look like for us? Well, we know moving's in the top 3 life stressors. So you're like, Brenna, you just kind of convinced me to think about it. Now you're telling me absolutely not. But I do want you to know that the research shows that moving is at the top 3 with death, divorce, and moving homes. So when I talk about cost, moving doesn't come without cost, but we have to think about whether we're going to make up for that cost through the gains that we're going to get. Why would we consider it then? We consider moving if we have a desire, right, to downsize. Some clients are in a large home and decide the maintenance on this property is just too much physically for me. Or I want to simplify, I'd like to travel more. So maintenance on a property is becoming more difficult because in this season of my life, I want to be able to fly to see kids or friends. I want to be able to take the trips that are on my bucket list. We need to be aware of whether we're handcuffed at all by the forced walls that support us. We also have to think about accessibility needs, and that's a current need as well as a future need. Can we make modifications to a home? And are you willing to explore modifications to the home? And I will use this, I like to use personal examples and some examples to drive this home, but about 10 years ago, my grandmother entered hospice, and she loved her house. She worked with the architect to design it. It was an old brick schoolhouse that they had built. She and my grandfather built through the inside to make it a home. And she always wanted to be an architect, but at the time it wasn't normal for women to become architects. She became a teacher instead. But this was her, in essence, life's work, was this property. And she had told us very clearly that she wanted to die at home. All of the bedrooms were upstairs or downstairs. There were no bathrooms on the main floor. To make her be able to die at home, we had to look at how she could use the property differently. And when we talked about adding a commode for her as things, she was like, we can't bring a commode in here. Where would it go? Well, we could put a privacy screen around. Well, that would look ridiculous. There was some pushback about how it looks versus how it would function. There was a lot of resistance to bringing a bed into the living room area. And we had to go through really a push and pull and realize as caregivers that things would happen in time when she was ready, as long as it wasn't posing an immediate safety risk. But one of the final baths that she gave, as you can see, I'm a woman of fair stature. So at the time, my grandmother was about 80 pounds, and we scooted she scooted on her butt up the stairs to the landing, in which I helped to bring her the rest of the way. And then to get into the bath, I had to physically lift her into the tub and lift her out of the tub. And this wasn't her desire for more of her kids or family to do that. She didn't want her children to see her in that light. She didn't want those physical cares. But we started switching shortly thereafter to sponge baths only. But that was one of her last baths that she had. And we recognized then that how the house was structured was really not friendly for aging. It was also not friendly for a ton of visitors. It was tucked away. There were stairs going up. In the winter, it required a lot of maintenance. Were we able to successfully make a plan for her to stay at home until she died? Yes. Did she have to change the way that she thought about how the house would operate? And eventually say, I'm okay with the hospital bed. I'm okay with the commode being tucked on we ended up putting it on a screened patio that's a 3-season porch so that she would be comfortable with that, right? We had to think about how we could use the space differently. Now, we've got to think about too maintenance, and that's what I was talking about with the light bulb a little bit. How are we going to pay for the monetary costs of aging in place, or how are we going to pay for the true costs of if we move to a rental or we buy into a community? How are we going to cover those costs with our retirement portfolios? And what's the time cost? And I hope this is one of those things that you really take away from today, is not only the tangible dollar and cents of what goes in and out every month, but the harder to know the regular expenses that come. If you can't do snow removal and you hire that out, that's an added cost. If you're not doing your gardening and you hire a landscaper, that's going to be an added cost. So not just what is a mortgage payment, or what is the HOA fee, or what is regular recurring monthly expenses, but how those costs might change or increase over time. And what quality of life markers are you looking for? I am an extrovert, okay? I know this about myself. I see a room of people and I'm like, I hope I'll get to talk to every one of them before I leave today. So for me, when I think about aging, I think about would I be able to live in a more engaged community? And as I mentioned, this even came up recently. I made a transition from my single-family home in South Minneapolis to a condo towards downtown Minneapolis. And in that condo, there are tons of activities. The community is very engaged. They have a book group that meets once a month. They have a wine club. They've got a whiskey club. They've got a biking group. And these are posted, and it's all it's a regular condominium community. It's not senior living, right? It's just a different group that's far more engaged. And I found myself, wow, this is so convenient. And to pet my extrovert, right, that helps me so much, because I can go home from work and say, I'm going to join them tonight at trivia, or I'm going to hop down to the game room and join them for this event. We've got to think about if social engagement is something that you desire. We've got to think about ways to accomplish that. And a lot of senior living communities offer some level of social engagement, more so than a single-family home. And I think that one of the biggest reasons I encourage people to consider a move is to avoid an emergency relocation. Oftentimes, Cindy and I are getting calls with clients in the midst of crisis. So either from them, their spouse, or their loved ones saying, my loved one's in the hospital right now. They experienced a fall. We've gotten maybe a broken hip, or there's just weakness because they were found after a couple of hours of being on the floor. We don't know why. the doctors say they look okay, everything looks okay, but they're very weak and they can't stand on their own. So we're going into rehabilitation temporarily, but we need to make a plan for after rehabilitation, after this 2 to 3 week support, what's going to happen long term. And I can tell you in the majority of those conversations, I'm not getting the call from the person who fell. I'm getting the call from their support system, which means that there's not as much autonomy in that choice. And if you are someone who likes control, and we can all pray on that to make sure that we know what we can and can't control in this life, right? But there's some autonomy in us selecting a community that's right for us, that works with the items we want and enjoy, and to be able to be the really, to choose that destination intentionally with the wisdom of what we know about our own finances, our own wishes. And I also think some clients talk to us about this really as an act of service. Have any of you had to clean out one of your loved ones' homes after they died? God bless each and every one of you. How long did that take you? Let's say 2 weeks, 3 months, 6 months, a year. This, one of our firm administrator just lost her father, and she communicated with me that there were 4 individuals in their family that had died before them, and her dad had been the person to take, the last grandma eggs stuff is in his garage. All these people's things have been amassed in his property. And now she's going through and spending time downsizing, getting rid of it, organizing it. So this can be an act of service too for your survivors. Right? What are people's concerns that I hear about most frequently? One is maintaining mobility and control of decision making. People want to have a say in where they live, and they should. Cost is the second biggest concern. Ability to live in the least restrictive environment. People don't want to, maybe you're wrong. How many of you want to go to a skilled nursing home? So I think there's that piece where we want to live in the least restrictive environment. We don't want to be in a place that's kind of a full care suite unless it's absolutely necessary. Isolation is a concern. Changes to family dynamic and traditions. Some of my clients have a really hard time. They're the host for holidays, right? They're the place where the holidays happen. And they tell me, if I move to an apartment, my kids wouldn't come or stay with me the way that they do now. And I don't want that to change, so I'm just going to stay in this house until I can't. But can we think through some changes to how we can still have those same traditions but do it differently? Can we stay open to what could be instead of what is? And changes to the dynamic, and that usually happens when caregiving relationships start coming up, okay? Or when we talked about changes to driving and needing to rely on others to drive, that always changes a dynamic. Often, if you're a parent, you think about you are the one in charge, your kids defer to you. There's always a shift, not always, but there can be a shift that happens when a kid then has to become a caregiver for a parent. And there are some real challenges that come for both sides of that equation with that change to the dynamic and availability of quality of care. So if we move, what's out there? What's the senior housing landscape today? I'm going to talk to you about independent senior living communities first. Independent senior living can be any arrangement of apartments, townhomes, condominiums. They're specifically designed with the wants and needs of older adults in mind, meaning they tend to be more accessible. They tend to offer some amenities that are included. And there are age restrictions on this community. Most of those age restrictions start at age 55 and go up. Now, when we're looking at shifting, we don't have to go right straight from single-family homes to senior living. If you say, ugh, I don't want to be in a senior living community, I'd love to see kids running down the hallways and have a family next door, or I'd like to see a little bit more multi-generational housing options. Well, apartments, condominiums can offer these things too in townhome communities, right? But what makes it the distinction independent senior living is the age restriction on the community, 55 plus. Now, it may include amenities like laundry, housekeeping, dining rooms, spas. Some of them have gyms or fitness centers and salons, all within an elevator ride or a short walk, right? So most people start looking at moving to independent senior living communities because of less maintenance. Right, that desire to downsize, have more flexibility, the need for greater accessibility. And by selling their property, they've reallocated their net worth, right? When we use our home equity, we take something that was invested in real estate, and we've got then more cash available. So there might be an increase in monthly cost of rent, but there's less expenses for, you're not driving as far, you're not hiring as much support or help, right? Those are harder costs, as I mentioned, to put side by side because it's not apples to apples, right? It's apples to oranges. We have to think about, do those benefits or amenities outweigh the increase of cost? There's also the proximity to social networks. And that could be new social networks, or you could have friends who are moving into the same community. There's generally more robust opportunities for socialization. Sometimes there's a proximity to retail, right? So there might be grocery stores nearby or within a short drive, half mile. And security within the building. Right? There's sometimes doormen or staff available. There's usually a fob or a key card that you need to get in to the different floors. There's additional security then for single-family homes. So when we're looking at townhomes or condominiums versus apartments, the biggest distinction between those two is ownership, right? So in a condo or townhome community, you're having an individually owned residence, one unit that you own within a greater complex. And with that comes real estate maintenance, right? You've got ongoing maintenance costs, insurance, property taxes. You've got the purchase, right, down payment, sale of an old property. And if you move from there, you're going to handle the sale as you would your single family home. Some people like that, right, because they want an investment in the real estate market. And they say, I trust the real estate market. I'd like to see how my investment changes or grows over the years, how my equity in this property changes. But it still offers some shared common spaces, some amenities and other resources available. With these, there's generally or always a homeowners association fee. So on top of your mortgage, if you have one at these properties, you're going to pay an ongoing HOA. You've got to look at what amenities are provided within that HOA to see if that's worth it for you. An apartment offers somewhat greater flexibility because at the end of the lease, if you don't like it, you just leave, right? Not just leave, but if you've moved, you're like, it's not just leaving. But you're renting a unit within a building, and you've got the landlord-tenant relationship. So you can go to your, if there's a cost or let's say one of your doors isn't functioning properly, you've got a microwave that quits working, all you do is pick up the phone for the landlord, and if it's a good landlord-tenant relationship, they're gonna come out and replace that timely. What's common in these rentals is that you're going to see increases annually with cost of living to that rent. So there's some less surety, right, about what those costs will be year over year. And there are, again, the shared common spaces. Senior cooperatives also shouldn't be ignored. Senior cooperatives are communities very similar. If you looked at them, you wouldn't probably know from looking at the building the difference between a condominium and a cooperative. Okay, so a cooperative, you own a share in the cooperative that gives you the right to live in a specific unit. Okay, so that's all the legal end of it, not how people live in it, right? But it's collectively owned and governed by the members. So these are nonprofits, and there's a board of directors that are appointed by the residents to oversee the operations. We want to look at cooperatives. When we're looking at these, we need to make sure that to the extent you can, you have an understanding of how the cooperative is doing business and how financially secure the building is, how they manage those expenses that they have if there's a big cost to improve the building, whether they have the financial means to do that through the HOA fees that they charge. The one thing that some people really like about this is that the cooperative generally assists with purchase and sale. So they usually have wait lists at these communities where when you're ready to sell or move from a cooperative, the cooperative itself is going to contact the people in line to do that. So it's not a traditional realtor arrangement. And the other thing to think about is that some of them will guarantee the equity, how your equity grows annually in the property. So there's a little bit of financial security for what expenses will exist. Now, these can offer amenities. It's very specific to each community. So I know that some questions that came up from people were, how do we know, like, is there some basics that are provided everywhere? No. That's what makes shopping for these hard, because the amenities are going to vary from community to community, and some of them are going to be based on when the community was built, right? And they also change. So often if the board of directors say, hey, we're not keeping up with the other buildings in the other communities like ours, we're going to invest in the addition of a gym or a shared space, that's possible. These are all options that are independent. Now, of course, with independent living options, you can always bring in care to those options, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But I want to transition now to what communities look like if there is a care need or we suspect one might come in the future, the long-term care landscape. And one of the things that emerged many years ago were these continuing care retirement communities, CCRCs. Now, for some reason, they're very popular, East Coast and West Coast. Here, we have fewer within the state of Minnesota, but there are some that are notable. We have Trillium, Friendship Village. Those are the two largest CCRCs in our area. The role of the CCRC was they wanted to create a model that was really allowing people to age in place, meaning after they move from their single family home to this community, they will not have to transition again. They can support you from full independence to skilled nursing care or hospice right within the same four walls of your property. The financial model is that they charge an entry fee. So typically, the average cost of these, and this is based on a national investment center that monitors senior housing and care statistics, so it's not based on what is offered locally here, but the average entry fee is $402,000. It's not uncommon, right, that the entry fee for these is that people are selling their homes, taking that equity, and reinvesting it in this CCRC. Now, when I say an entry fee, they don't keep it. You're in essence paying to be able to live there. The community, how their financial model works is they're taking all these entry fees, they invest the pool of it. Because they invest that pool, it allows for bigger growth on that investment, which allows them to then reinvest in the community, in the staffing, and then they'll guarantee if you die or move that you get your entry fee back. Okay, so this is how that model kind of runs. There's still a monthly fee, though, tied with this. It's called a maintenance charge. And in 2021, so even though we're in 2023, in long-term care, stats are still based on 2021 because it takes a while to do the 2022 recalibration. Okay, so the monthly maintenance fee nationwide was $3,555. What's included for that? People are like, gosh, that is way more expensive than maybe my mortgage or what the cost for me to live at home right now. There's a few different types of contracts that exist. One is called an extensive life care contract, where when you're paying that monthly amount annually, you keep paying that, and as your care needs increase, there's no cost change. That's pretty spectacular if you know what costs of care are, and we'll get into that more as you need skilled nursing options, right? But yes, Sue. Oh, sure, $3,555 nationwide. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Right.
If I can,
You just come over.
sorry. Oh, if I can just add one thing, know that you just don't need 400,000 and then maybe 50,000 a year to live, right? They will investigate what your portfolio looks like. So it's not, some people say, great, I could go over to Friendship Village and pay 400 and that, yay, they'll take care of me for life. So just to be, I know Brenna will talk a little bit more about that, but just to be very cautious about that.
Right, thank you, Cindy. Keep that. The other modified contract, Cindy's talking about this, because some of these CCRC communities offer these different level of contracts where you can pay a lower monthly amount. It's a fee-for-service contract where, in essence, you're paying a really low monthly rate, but it increases then as your service needs increase. So you don't have that surety of those fixed fees or involved. And then there's a modified contract that says, we're going to have you pay somewhere in between those options, and then you're going to, at certain particular levels, if you need X amount of service or X amount of hour, then it would bump you to the next level. So for these communities, really the financial model anticipates that someone is selling or liquidating a property or a portion of their portfolio to move in, with the idea that this is the one and done move of their lifetime. So the considerations, there are some considerations that I want to highlight with couples who are thinking about these communities. This model often really works well if we have people who have very different care needs. So if I have someone where their spouse has a diagnosis or a level of care, the CCRC community is going to provide options for social engagement that provides them the ability to both be stimulated, right, socially or through the activities that are available and through the amenities that are available, yet it still offers a place for both of them to come together as a couple to do things as a unit as well. Instead of having one person move into, let's say, an assisted living and the other person stay at home, right? It provides that community internally. So one of the questions that I know people had was, you know, there are different models or organizations for these businesses or organizations. Some of them are not-for-profits, some of them are for-profits. What do we need to know about that? And I would say that, you know, there's some distinctions with a nonprofit entity. One is it's mission-driven, right? That's every nonprofit drives on a mission that's important to their existence. It's what their strategic plan for the organization and the people they serve is going to be governed by. Oh, I forgot. There's a bullet here that says reinvest profits in ... the community, okay? So it reinvests profits in the community to meet the needs of the residents. So what that means is that the nonprofits are not going to be putting their commercial interests first. They're going to be looking at what the needs of the community that lives there are and how they can support that. Where that makes a difference is, let's say you've got a CCRC that's a nonprofit entity, which most are. Those profits that they're getting on pooling the investments isn't just going to the shareholders or stakeholders in the business. It gets reinvested back into the community. So let's say there's staffing shortages in long-term care, which are rampant right now. They can say, we're gonna pay a higher level. We're gonna pay staff more because we want them to stay there longer. We don't want the turnover we're experiencing. Or we wanna hire more people so our staff stays longer so they're not burnt out, right? Because that's gonna meet our residents' needs more. We found that this community is really engaged. We need more activities. We're gonna need another activities director, right? There's all of these things that they can look at, again, based on the needs of the residents within the community to drive it. Now, a for-profit, I mean, it's just the way it is, but you know, their goal is to turn a profit. They do not want to experience a business loss or a financial loss. The first people that have to be satisfied in a for-profit arrangement are the owners or the stakeholders in that organization. And we see this, I mean, Cindy and I have watched this in a couple of the assisted living communities near our firm where our clients keep getting alerted, there's a change in management again. It's happened 4 times in 4 years. Why does their management keep turning over and their staffing turnover as a result? Well, the community is not filled. The stakeholders are mad that they're not seeing the profit on a full facility, right? And then they're firing the management team who's responsible for that. So the difference can mean more transition when it comes to staff. But there are some for-profit models who have this down, who do it well, who have done it all over the country, right? And who do it locally. So you can get, what I guess I need you to know is you can get quality care from either option. But if mission-driven is important to you, or seeing a reinvestment of profits for certain particular purposes, you may want to steer towards nonprofit models. Okay. So I'm hearing bells, so I'm probably approaching my time. But if you'll, can I talk for a couple more minutes? Okay. Okay, and if you have to leave or give me the hook, you just start standing, I'll take my cue, okay? Scott. Yeah.
Oh. Scott.
Thank you. When you
talk about the nonprofit, for-profit, and then the CCRC. So what happens if you, like with all of these, is that, like say you run out of money, do they give you your down payment back and say, well, it's too bad, you need to leave?
Oh, thank you for bringing that up. That was a really important point that I wanted to make and just breezed right by. So often what these contracts will offer is, let's say you've reduced your assets. You've lived there for a long time. Now you've run out of money to be able to pay your maintenance fee fully or to pay for those additional services. Many of these CCRC communities will allow, especially the nonprofit ones in particular, it's part of their, the differences or distinctions between that. They will allow you to, in essence, use your entry fee as a bank. And what I mean by that is that then the entry fee can start being depleted to pay your ongoing expenses to live there until that's exhausted or until you die. Okay, and when it's exhausted, the community will still allow you to stay. The idea is that you have some assurance that you can live there throughout the end of your days. Okay, so this is one of the things that people say, but my money is all going to be caught up in the CCRC. What if I run out? They will assess you when you move in, and they're going to ask for information with most of these places about your financial ability to pay for they want to make sure that you can, right? They don't want you to run out of money. They want you to privately continue paying those expenses. But there are safeguards, and it's important to look at those contracts and ask that question if you're reviewing the community. A for-profit model really, typically, when it comes to long-term care, if you run out of money, most places, not most, some places will allow you to use programs like public assistance to help finance costs of care. This is a care discussion, not an independent living conversation, but it's very facility dependent, and we've had places, and it's more marketers from those places tell our clients in assisted living or skilled that you can live here, we'll be able to take you, even if you run out of money, you'll be fine. And we've seen that the reality of that's not the case. That might be the case when they're eager to fill a bed, but when they have the wait list, it's not. And so it's very difficult because often the first point of contact that you're working with is a marketing person, right? But we have to look at the terms of the lease or the contract before you enter it to ask the pointed questions about what's your policy? Can you put that policy in writing? Yes. Oh, sorry.
Since we're talking about finances, how does long-term care insurance, if you have it, fit into this picture?
Great question. If you'll let me, I'm going to get there. So I'm going to put it on the table, but I promise we're going to pick it up, okay? So I just want to tell you a little bit about the distinctions between assisted living and the difference between memory care and skilled nursing before we get into the payer models. So assisted living, what you need to know is it's a rental. It's in essence independent senior living community, but they contract with a third party for the care, and they have an exclusive contract with that care provider. So if you need care services, you can add those on with that care provider. Generally, it's an apartment feel, right? That's one of the biggest differences. Why it emerged in the market was because really in the 1980s and early 1990s, we went from kind of an institutional model, skilled nursing homes traditionally is what we call them, where people had a shared room with a shower curtain in between them, right? And no kind of personalization, to people saying, why, because I'm aging, do I have to sacrifice wanting my own, apartment that I can make mine with my own furniture, my own artwork, my own plants, pets, whatever? And so the idea of assisted living was really born from that desire. So it's going to be an apartment with a kitchen or a kitchenette, and you're going to have a suite, which is in essence a studio option, a one bedroom plus den, 2-bedroom. It's hard to find anything larger than that in assisted living. The services can increase as care needs increase, and the model for payment is you're paying a base rent, but then everything else is a la carte. So it's harder to pin down from a pricing model what's included and what's not. You've got meal packages, medication packages if you need help with medication management, service packages that some are extra for things like incontinence support, or if someone's having behaviors related to a diagnosis of dementia. And the staffing, what's important is a nurse or an LPN is really only available during the week. They're always on call to the staff there, but they're really only in the building during core business hours. Memory care is the assisted living model with specialized staff that has been trained and given resources about dementia and Alzheimer's. Usually, it's in an assisted living facility where there's a separate wing that's marked by a secured entrance. And a suite or a studio is the most common option. Staffing, there's more staffing in those areas. So sometimes my clients who don't have memory needs but have a higher level of care need, you'll see the assisted living encouraging their family to move them into the memory care unit. Why? Because the staffing ratio is higher. They can't get to the call button fast enough in assisted living, so they want to move you from this apartment to that one. So as far as age in place, the assisted living model is not fully age in place because you may have to transition within the facility to be in a room that caters to your needs. Residents can roam because they're secured, within the unit freely, but not to the exterior. And there's assistance available for all daily activities of daily living, either hands-on support or queuing, reminders to do that. And it's really similar to the payer model of assisted living. We have clients sometimes, if there's differing levels of care needs, who move into the same assisted living community, where one is a spouse who doesn't need care and is living more independently, paying the base rent, and then another is living maybe in the memory care wing, but they like that it's the same place, and they are familiar with the staff, they're right there to do check-ins. This is all considerations available. And residential care homes. These are home settings. They look like single-family homes. So from the outside, you wouldn't necessarily know. It provides a level of care. It's located within a neighborhood. There's generally anywhere between 4 and 10 residents in a home. They have either private or shared bathrooms, depending on the layout of the property. And a client in these situations generally has a skilled care need. I recently had a client come to me, talk to me about her experience with her husband. She resided in a single-family home, and her husband moved into a residential care home. And what she really liked about it is it's a neighborhood. For him, it wasn't like he was moving to a skilled nursing facility or assisted living, a big complex. He was in the community that he was used to, just in a different property. The nurses that are available are generally floating between locations. And what I mean by that is often the owners of residential care homes own multiple houses, and then the nurses float between those houses depending on their schedule or need. And we always have to ask about staffing and whether they have fully awake hours, meaning are staff going to be awake during the evenings if there's a need that arises. There's sometimes more specialization in a diagnosis. So for example, there's Parkinson's care homes, suites, go ahead. Parkinson's specialty care. Parkinson's Specialty Care, for example, has multiple homes that offers that specialization in Parkinson's treatment, which is really specialized for a number of reasons, including the medication management that goes into that. And nursing facilities. This is what we know to be old, kind of the old school model of a nursing home. We call it sometimes skilled nursing facility, long-term care, or nursing home. Same place, different words, okay? They're staffed, nurses are staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's an ability to handle a higher level of care needs like feeding tubes or wound care, 2-person transfers. There can be private rooms or shared rooms. Generally, private rooms incur an additional private room fee from the facility. And the rate for that place is dependent on the level of care needs. So a nurse assesses someone and it determines what we call a case mix classification. It takes all these factors in, and these are regulated by the state. And so then it spits out the dollar figure tied with that care need, okay? That assessment is the same from skilled nursing home to skilled nursing home, okay? And it's an all-inclusive cost, so you don't see a separate line item for rent. If you're living there, you have a skilled care need, and living there is part of that care plan. And so rental expenses are all tied into the daily rate. And usually these have transitional care units. So when people do have like a hip break or they have a need for rehabilitation services, they can move into transitional care there where there's rehab support, like occupational therapy and physical therapy available. And then we have hospice.
Brenna, can I add one thing? One thing that we forgot to add here is in a skilled nursing facility, some of them have memory care units. So sometimes people get confused about where am I going for memory care? And they think it's a location. There are some assisted livings, all they have is memory care. So you go to Sweet Living, all of those buildings are only for memory care, people with cognitive issues. So you can go to an assisted living specializing in memory care, or the other one is Emerald Crest. They all have memory care units. Or you can go to the assisted living who has a separate wing. So you can have a spouse live in the apartment and someone live in memory care. Or you can go to the care center, and they too will have a memory care wing that has a secured door to get in and out so those folks are safe and people can't just wander back and forth. And not every skilled nursing facility has a memory care unit, but sometimes I think we have a lot of people get confused about where is the memory care? I thought it was at assisted living, or I thought it was at the care center. So you can have memory care in a couple different locations.
Thank you. Thanks. I'm going to just touch on for you that hospice specifically is where it can be administered wherever you call home. So hospice is a benefit that's provided through your health insurance. So for most of you, that will be through Medicare. And it also covers durable medical equipment needs and prescriptions that are tied to your care during that time. And it's for any age. So Cindy and I were talking through this last night, and we were like, you know, most of the time when you see photos of hospice, you see people dying in a bed that's really doesn't look like hospice supports families. You can have a child on hospice, you can have a woman with breast cancer on hospice, right? You can have a senior on hospice. Hospice can support you at any age. Really, the distinction is if a doctor has said you have a prognosis of 6 months or less to live, they don't hold you to that, okay? So, so you can renew your hospice certificate, okay? I promise. And they have ancillary services as well. In addition to the direct care that's provided by the nurses or the staff coming in, PCAs coming in. There's social workers, chaplains. Now there's death doulas in many of the hospice providers, music therapy, massage therapy, pet therapy. These are all supposed to really help with your care, comfort, and quality of life throughout the dying journey. And if you're interested in more information about end of life or hospice particularly, we're doing a whole day conference on it. And I put a postcard in your folders about that. It's free. So evaluating care facilities, it's really difficult with all of these options to know, how do we assess that this place is right for me? Quality of care should always come first. It's the hardest thing, though, to decipher as an outsider looking in. That's one of the things we always check is the Medicare star ratings that are available. But that's not a full picture, right, of the provider. And so often it helps to have someone assisting you in marshaling through these options. The type of care, the diagnosis or prognosis involved, the engagement you want, the location, right? So some people tell me, I definitely want to be within like a 3-mile radius of where I lived before, or I really want to be close to my kids, and I want to be down the street so they can come visit me often. Location can be important, but I put that lower on the list in general than quality of care and type of care offered. And then cost is something that everyone worries about. So I want to bring this up and get to some of the payer sources. Here are average rates right here in the Minneapolis area, and this is based on 2021, expect about a 3% bump annually at least, for a private room in a skilled nursing facility. Average rate right now, $13,055 a month. For a semi-private room, $11,708 a month. Assisted living, people are like, whoa, assisted living's cheap compared to these things, $5,163. But with the caveat that Genworth, who does this study of cost of care year over year, because assisted living models bill differently, right? They have the base rent and then care packages are a la carte. It's very hard to average out a cost for assisted living. What I would say I see more in our area, if you need any sort of medication support or a lower level of care support, and you're in the Twin Cities, $7,000 to $8,000 a month, which would include rent and a care package, a small care package. The average for home health care or chore services is $7,055 a month. And that's definitely not for 24-hour support. Okay, so what you're seeing with home health and chore services is the vast range of people, right? You have some people getting chore services as a way to age in place. So they have the support and help, and they might need very limited chore services or home health coverage, all the way to needing someone 24 hours a day, round the clock. And then adult day programs on a monthly basis where someone goes to receive care for a number of hours per day. And by the way, if you know any marketing experts, somebody needs to rebrand the term adult day center. I mean, this is a terrible, nobody wants to go to daycare as an adult, right? This is, we gotta do something about that. So with these costs, there's got to be, most people, even if you've really planned well for retirement, aren't able to sustain a long term of privately paying for skilled nursing home in a private room, indefinitely. Right? That's just an expense that most of us can't fully protect or plan for. I'm going to talk a little bit about payment sources and private pay resources. I'm skipping ahead because I could talk, as you know, for hours and hours and hours. But for private pay resources, I just want you to know that for the payment sources here, the model of long-term care specifically is designed for people to privately finance their care needs. So some of you might be saying, but I have Medicare. Doesn't my health insurance pick up any of this? Think of Medicare and health insurance. Their whole goal is to, if you have a break, to fix it and get you back to health. Short-term, emergent issues and ongoing wellness, but for chronic conditions, generally, your health insurance is not going to pay for long-term care. That means private funds are going to have to do that, either through your monthly income streams, Social Security, pension, benefits, or through your assets, retirement accounts, investment portfolio, bank accounts, etc. We will largely need to privately pay for the cost of our care. And one way that people privately pay for their care is through insurance that they've purchased, long-term care insurance. The issue with long-term care insurance is that model was developed before those insurance policies started to have to pay for costs of care, right? So if you have long-term care insurance, it's likely that you've seen increases to premiums or a reduction of coverage. It's very rare for us to see what I would call a gold star long-term care package that is all-inclusive, meaning you've paid premiums, it doesn't have a lifetime cap, so no lifetime cap would pay for all skilled nursing, assisted living, home care options. Very rare. If you have it, please don't stop paying premiums. If you don't have it, you're not going to find them anymore. They're not sold. Now the long-term care insurance market has also changed to offer some hybrid options that are like insurance or life insurance with a long-term care insurance rider, or an annuity package that takes a portion of your retirement account, puts it into an annuity with a long-term care rider available. Generally, those hybrid policies you can still purchase as long as you're under age 70. If you're over age 70, those policies are going to be harder to acquire. If you have long-term care insurance, it's important that you familiarize yourself with the scope of coverage. So every year you get kind of what we call a deck sheet that says, here's what's embodied in my insurance. Here's my lifetime maximum. Here's the daily rate that it'll pay if I'm in a skilled nursing home, in an assisted living, or in a home health setting. And here's the elimination period, how long I'm going to have to privately pay before this policy kicks in. Often my clients wait to start tapping into their long-term care insurance, or they tell me, I have it, but we don't want to start it just yet, because they don't think their care needs is great, or they might go through the lifetime cap sooner. But often home health benefits, how these policies work, is that some of them allow you to start with even 1 day a week of that home health care or chore services, which then counts towards 7 days a week of the elimination period. So sometimes we want to tap into that policy sooner rather than later, so we can maximize or get the big benefits when we really need it and start incurring larger costs. You generally have to have a trigger to qualify, like 2 activities of daily living, needing support with things like bathing, dressing, grooming, toileting, mobility, transfers, feeding, or you need constant supervision. That word was hard to get out. Supervision to accomplish your activities of daily living. So a cognitive impairment. I have a client right now who couldn't live independently. He was missing work. He has early onset and was missing work, showing up disheveled, couldn't keep track of time anymore, and had lived alone. And his sisters had to move him into assisted living, but he's pretty independent in assisted living. He can walk and move freely. He's not driving anymore. He participates in choir. He does other items, and he can get to and from his room fine. He needs support throughout the day, and they have caregivers coming in. But he is not meeting the criteria from the Transamerica long-term care insurance policy. So even though they're incurring about $8,000 a month of costs, he's not meeting the needing help with 2 activities of daily living or constant supervision. So we want to be aware of that and how we're going to tap into it and how to advocate for you if you've got this. The other payment sources, as I mentioned, your Medicare benefit covers short-term coverage for rehabilitation services or home health benefits and hospice. But if you exhaust your assets, then we may need to look into public benefits like medical assistance, which is under the Medicaid umbrella here in Minnesota, and veterans benefits available. This is a lot of info. And what I would tell you is, this is really hard. I understand it's hard to navigate. We understand it's hard to navigate. And this isn't a plug for our firm, but it is a plug for you developing what I call a personal board of directors. Okay? So I want, one of the things today I want you to think about after this is, who's on your personal board of directors? You should have your financial advisor or planner that's part of that you would really, what I want to say is, you trust them to do the right thing with your money, but you also like them enough to call when there's something that's happening with your health, or there's a change that you are considering. You want to be able to talk to them about your big life decisions. An elder law attorney. Very important, because one of the distinguishing factors between somebody who just does estate planning and someone who does elder law is a knowledge about the long-term care landscape and how these programs work to fit together. An accountant, trusted family members. So think of your family members. I've put some of my family members on what I call the advisory committee. They can give me info, but I might not follow it, right? But which ones are on my personal board of directors that if they give me an opinion, I'm really going to take that to heart and think about how I might implement it. Cherished friends might be part of that. Your clergy, right? Your faith community, certain people from that you go to. Care providers, too. And this is where, if you have identified someone in your life that you think, as I age, this person is who I'm going to tap to provide care, or naturally it's happening. So for example, in my client yesterday afternoon, the daughter-in-law and her father-in-law get along. They call her the whisperer, the mic whisperer. Why? Because she and him have a special bond, and he'll listen to her when he needs an opinion, or if he needs care, he'll follow her instruction. Okay, so you might think about who are the people you're going to tap on the shoulder if you need care, because as we start having conversations about what you want and what your expectations are, right? What your expectations are for how you want to live, how you think your community is going to support you, we want to involve the right people in that conversation. So planning for this is complex, but you're going to have a team of people to help you navigate it, so you don't have to go it alone. I've included information about life care planning in particular and the role of an elder law attorney. I think it's important, as I mentioned, to know how they're distinguished, but I think about this sort of planning for our clients as a three-legged stool. There's the financial piece, there's the legal piece, and there's the care piece, and you're at the center. And we need to make sure that we surround you to provide all three of those buckets, or all three of those legs, right? To make sure I'm not mixing metaphors. So please ask questions if you have them. I'll stick around for a while as well, and join us in May if you're interested in end-of-life planning and hospice. More information on those topics as well.
Thank you, Brenna. And I will leave this at the back table. If you're interested on being on a mailing list for our firm, you could sign up. We don't send out a lot of stuff, but you would hear about our conference that we have coming up, and they might give you some like news articles that you may find of interest. And I'll put this at the back table.
Brenna, we've got a few questions for you.
Sure, great.
I'd just like to add two things from my experience with working with people making decisions like this. And one is, though there are very well-run for-profit care centers, I've had experience with those for-profit facilities where the goal really is just to make a profit and then flip.
Oh, right.
And one in my neighborhood is flipped twice before, and now it flipped again, and now it's a Presbyterian Homes, and I assume it will not flip again. The other thing is, I've encountered people thinking if they have long-term care insurance that it lasts indefinitely. They don't understand about the caps.
Right. Thank you. And yes, I want to reiterate that, as I mentioned, that you can get quality care at both for-profit and nonprofit facilities. It's running a successful business does not make you not be mission-driven or people-driven, okay? So thank you. Yes, Scott. Oh, sorry.
I was just wondering if, so like we have an estate attorney that took care of, that kind of thing. But can you talk more that relationship or that interplay with an what was the word, estate or elder
law and
elder
estate
law?
planning?
Yeah. How does that
Sure.
play out?
So estate planning often is geared towards first the what if. What if I'm incapacitated? Who's going to help manage my finances or medical care? And then what happens to my money when I die? Not all estate planning attorneys have expertise in long-term care. An elder law attorney does have knowledge and is trained specifically on long-term care and how people pay for long-term care, asset preservation strategies if we might need care in the future that people can take. And to be honest, a lot of the estate planning we do when we're healthy and well changes when a long-term care need comes into play. For example, if you've designated your spouse as your attorney-in-fact for finances and they're incapacitated, do we need to replace them with someone else, right? Or do we need to think about how the money would be managed for them, how they would be supported? So the planning changes, the estate planning changes when long-term care is a need. It's important that you have somebody who knows all components of this. Yeah.
First of all, Brenna, thank you so much for being with us today. I am not yet making these decisions for myself, but I am a family member, and I just can't tell you how much this conversation has enriched me and helped me, and I hope it's been that way for those of you in this room as well. I'm reminded of Tim's sermon title from Easter Sunday, which is Easter Takes Courage. And this seems like a topic that takes a lot of courage to face, but I think being able to think through these in a calm and relational and informed way is so important. So thank you so much for being here. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you. Two quick announcements. I know Sue's gonna tell us about the next Third Age program. I'm gonna tell you what's happening in 22 minutes. Mayor Fry has been organizing gatherings throughout the city regarding the question of where should the third precinct police station be located. He has been organizing these gatherings throughout the city. We're actually having one here at 1 o'clock. The Magnet has put it together. It's specifically asking for the opinions of seniors and elders in the community. So if you'd like to get your lunch and then head over there at 1 o'clock, it's in the Meisel room. There's an opportunity for that conversation. I don't know whether the mayor will be here or somebody from the mayor's office, but that's the conversation. So please feel free to go to that one. If you're interested in the Richard Leider presentation that we had, his book, Who Do You Want to Be When You Grow Old? The Path of Purposeful Aging. It seems like he was here and he gave a presentation on that. We're having a book club around that. Megan Gage Finn is organizing it. The first meeting will be April 27th from 11:30 to 1 p.m. in the Garden Room, and it'll meet the second and fourth Tuesdays thereafter. So if you are interested in that, reach out to Megan and she can get you connected to that group. It's lunch available for $5 and bring your own copy of the book. That's all I have for announcements. I know Sue's going to tell us what's next at Third Age. Thanks, Sue.
I'll be real quick. Upcoming Third Age programs, we've got May 10th, Enrichment Through Drumming, which is put on by the Smiling Drum Studio. If you want to improve your concentration, boost your confidence, brain power, and immune system, are you interested in playing all styles of music? Are you looking to train your ear? Then come and join us for some fun. The Smiling Drum Ensemble is a community group that enjoys learning and sharing world drum music. It should be a good time. They're going to bring some instruments for us to try our hand at drumming. We will not have summer programs, so June, July, and August, we will be busy making plans for next year's programs, getting ready for you. We hope you enjoy yourselves for the summer, and thank you for coming today, and lunch is ready.